The attacks and defamation against J.K. Rowling continue. This time it's being done by popular news aggregator discussing film. Before we get to this, I'd like to ask you, please hit that subscribe button, hit that bell for notifications so you don't miss any of our future videos here at the Trent Report. Let's get into this here. This is over at thatparkplace.com. Why have you not bookmarked this site yet? But popular news aggregator discussing film posted this to X. Known transphobe J.K. Rowling is now reported to be an active executive producer on the Harry Potter series, where she will be involved in the show's decision making. To no one's surprise, they literally turned off the comment section because they know what they were doing is absolutely wrong, and they know people were going to call them out for it. I think they should probably already have a community. This should already be community noted for absolutely defaming J.K. Rowling. And honestly, I think if you're going to do stuff like this, I think X needs to start striking accounts. And so if you're going to constantly defame people, maybe there should be consequences to that, and you shouldn't be able to profit off of it. Because clearly this is a massively popular news aggregator that makes probably a lot of money from the platform. You can see 11.7 million views just off of this post alone, spreading their lies to millions of people. Absolutely sickening. But let's actually get into their claim here and explain why this is indeed defamation. The fact that Rowling will be an executive producer is not new news. Warner Brothers made it abundantly clear in their press release confirming the show or announcing the show, which was previously first scooped here at That Park Place by WDW Pro. In the press release from April of last year, we're almost going on an entire year since this was announced. The series will be a faithful adaptation of the beloved Harry Potter book series by author and executive producer J.K. Rowling. Right there, already confirmed that she was indeed the executive producer back in April when they announced the show. So this is not new news, which leads me to believe that the only reason why they even posted this is to attack J.K. Rowling, spread their hate, spread their vile, and try and get other people to buy into it, or use it as an opportunity to attack Rowling. And then I think also probably cynically to just get money from it because they knew it would go big. Rowling, as part of the press release, said, Max's commitment to preserving the integrity of my books is important to me, and I'm looking forward to being part of this new adaptation, which will allow for a degree of depth and detail only afforded by a long-form television series. So she made it very clear she was part of the show, and they made it clear she was an executive producer. So that's not new news. We knew that. And then she's not a transphobe. She actually believes in transgender ideology. She's made this abundantly clear. She says here in these a number of contradictory tweets, if I'm being honest, she says, if sex isn't real, this is from 2020. If sex isn't real, there's no same-sex marriage. If sex isn't real, the lived reality of women globally is erased. I know and love trans people, but erasing the concept of sex removes the ability of many to meaningfully discuss their lives. It isn't hate to speak the truth. The idea that women like me, who've been empathetic to trans people for decades, feeling kinship because they're vulnerable in the same way as women, i.e. to male violence, hate trans people because they think sex is real and has lived consequences is nonsense. And then she says, I respect every trans person's right to live any way that feels authentic and comfortable to them. So she's saying that sex is real, but then she's saying that you can change it. Doesn't make any sense. I'd march with you if you were being discriminated against on the basis of being trans. At the same time, my life has been shaped by being female. I do not believe it's hateful to say so. So clearly contradictory here, but she's also saying she supports the ideology. I respect every trans person's right to live any way that feels authentic and comfortable to them. This ideology is wrong. You cannot change sex. J.K. Rowling is wrong on this. So I'm defending her. I'm defending her from being defamed by discussing film, but I'm also criticizing her for being wrong on this, which she is. They're both wrong, right? She would elaborate on this in a blog post. She says, I want to be very clear here. I know transition will be a solution for some gender dysphoric people, although I'm also aware through extensive research that studies have consistently shown that between 60 to 90% of gender dysphoric teens will grow out of their dysphoria. I don't think transitioning is a solution at all. Body mutilation is never good, and lying to people does not solve people's problems. So she's wrong there as well. Because pushing the transgender ideology is lying to people. You're telling them that males can become females and females can become males, which it can't. It just is not. It's impossible. It cannot happen. Then she goes on to explain why she basically opposes the ideology now, even though she really believes it. She does believe in the ideology, but she thinks they've just gone too far. She says the current explosion of trans activism is urging a removal of almost all the robust systems through which candidates for sex reassignment were once required to pass. A man who intends to have no surgery and take no hormones may now secure himself a gender recognition certificate and be a woman in the sight of the law. Many people aren't aware of this. So she's explaining why she's opposing it now. And then she also claims that transgender ideology is misogynistic. She said, I've read all the arguments about femaleness not residing in the sex body and the assertions that biological women don't have common experiences, and I find them too deeply misogynistic and regressive. It's also clear that one of the objectives of denying the importance of sex is to erode what some seem to see as the cruelty or of the cruelly segregationist idea of women having their own biological realities or just as threatening unifying realities that make them a cohesive political class. But as many women have said before me, woman is not a costume. Woman is not an idea in a man's head. Woman is not a pink brain, a liking for Jimmy Choos or any of the other sexist ideas now somehow touted as progressive. Moreover, the inclusive language that calls female people menstruators and people with vulvas strikes many women as dehumanizing and demeaning. It is. I understand why trans activists consider this language to be appropriate and kind. It's not, and it's not appropriate. It's not kind. But for those of us who've had degrading slurs spat at us by violent men, it's not neutral. It's hostile and alienating. So explaining her kind of position there. But then she goes on to say that she believes that it is possible for men to become women and vice versa. She says, I believe the majority of trans-identified people not only pose zero threat to others, but are vulnerable for all the reasons I've outlined. Trans people need and deserve protection. Like women, they're most likely to be killed by sexual partners. Trans women who work in the industry, particularly trans women of color, are at particular risk. Like every other domestic abuse and sexual assault survivor I know, I feel nothing but empathy and solidarity with trans women who've been abused by men. So I want trans women to be safe. Well, there's no such thing as a trans woman. That is a man. There are men and women. There's no such thing as trans women. They just don't exist. At the same time, I do not want to make natal girls and women less safe. When you throw open the doors of bathrooms and changing rooms to any man who believes or feels he's a woman, and as I've said, gender confirmation certificates may now be granted without any need for surgery or hormones, then you open the door to any and all men who wish to come inside. That is the simple truth. So obviously, agree to a certain extent on that point. Men should not be allowed to be going into women's bathrooms, but that's because they're men, right? They're men. And she's really confused because she thinks there's this idea of trans women when they just don't exist. There's men and there's women, and that's it. So the idea, I kind of feel like I've covered this already, but I'll say it anyways. So the idea of calling Rowling a transphobe is quite laughable, given she actually believes in much of their ideology, despite it being immoral. Her main opposition to the ideologies that is encroaching on the benefits that so-called feminism has granted women over the last few decades. I think that's pretty accurate there. And then we've seen this from discussing film before, right? They've done this before. J.K. Rowling is not the first person they've defamed. They did it back to Gina Carano in 2021. They posted this. Hashtag fire Gina Carano is trending worldwide on social media after Gina Carano shared a disgusting post that compared being a Republican to being a Jew during the Holocaust. The entire post is a lie. Her social media post was not disgusting. It was actually just a repost from Warrior Priest Jim podcast, which no one points that out at all. But here's a screenshot showing it. You can see that it's a screenshot, and she shared it to her Instagram stories. You can see what it reads. It says Jews were beaten in the streets not by Nazi soldiers, but by their neighbors, even by children. Because history is edited, most people don't realize that to get to the point where Nazi soldiers could easily round up thousands of Jews, the government first made their own neighbors hate them simply for being Jews. How is that any different from hating someone for their political views? Nowhere is there a mention of Republicans. Nowhere is there any kind of comparison between Republicans and Jews. In fact, Gina Carano addressed her intention behind sharing the Instagram post from Warrior Priest Jim podcast in an interview with Ben Shapiro. She said, I've been so inspired by the gentle spirit of the Jewish people going through that time. And I think I watched this older Holocaust survivor, her court case, and they found this old Nazi man, and he was old, and they rolled him in on a stretcher and really played this up. And she forgave him. She forgave him in court after putting her through what he did, and she faced him. And I'm always so inspired by these stories. And I always wondered, like, how did that happen? So when I posted that, it wasn't something that I felt like was controversial. It was something that I thought, well, maybe all of us need to ask ourselves how that happened, because, it's important. The post never said anything about Republicans or conservatives. Doesn't say anything about that in there. It was more about people tearing each other apart. I thought it would be more of a thing where you bring people together. So clearly disputing what Discussing Film is lying about her. I mean, they're clearly just like straight up lying about her. Obviously, they were doing this before she did the interview with Ben Shapiro, but they were drawing their own assumptions as to what the post was about, and I think that tells you more about what they're at. And they are clearly not just an entertainment aggregator. They are trying to influence people's minds. They are trying to push an agenda. They have an agenda to push, and they will try and they will use everything at their behest to do that. And they've done it against Gina Carano. They've done it against J.K. Rowling. And I would not be surprised if they do it to anyone they think is opposed to their ideological agenda. So I don't think that is a site that you should probably be using to find your entertainment news. They are not a good and reputable source. They obviously lie repeatedly, and they don't care about their lying. They don't care that they're lying. They obviously don't. They probably relish it and enjoy it and get off on it. That is why they turned off the comments for the J.K. Rowling post, because they knew they would be called on their lies, and they don't want to see that. So these people are disgusting. They're immoral, and I don't think that you should be following them to get your entertainment news from them. There are a lot of other better options out there, and I think people should start using different options than discussing film as their entertainment news aggregator. Those are my thoughts on the matter. Let me know what you guys think about what discussing film has done to J.K. Rowling and Gina Carano. Let me know in the comments below. Remember to always be charitable, but to always speak the truth.